my name is Rachel and I'm here today to do a wrap up for January 2018, and heads up, wasn't a good month at all. I read 9 things this month. I mean, I'm going to talk about 10 because I finished one on the 1st of February, but I'm including it anyway because by the time I go to wrap it up next month I'll have forgotten about it. So yes, I'm going to get straight into it because I have a few things to talk about, and I have like abundance of currently reading because my mood reading is going a bit mental at the moment. So yeah, I'm just going to get started. So I start with my lowest ratings and work my way up. So yeah, I'm just going to start with the lowest, which is 2 stars. 2 stars does mean that I liked it, I just didn't have any overwhelming feelings of love for it. So the first one is Moonstone by Sion, the Boy Who Never Was. This is about a boy in Iceland, and this is about a boy who I think might be bisexual, just from like the story basically. He sleeps with men for money, and this is very graphic. This has a lot of graphic sex scenes. It opened on a very graphic sex scene and I didn't realise it was one at first. It kind of, like, it doesn't let you know immediately that it is one, and then you get a few lines in and you're like, oh shit, it's that. Oh, I didn't realise it was that. Which was quite cool. And it reminded me of Grief is a Thing with Feathers by Max Porter in the way that it had this really like bizarre style and like description of things, and kind of things that were described that weren't really happening, but it described them in a way that made you understand what was happening. It was quite cool. And I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the end and everything, but I didn't have any like big feelings for this. So yeah, I gave this 2 stars. The next one I have is The Beautiful Cassandra by Jane Austen. I gave this 2 stars and maybe 2.5 stars, but there were some stories in here that I would have given a lot higher, and then there were some things in here that I just wouldn't. So this is a few things in. The letters I wasn't really that fond of, to be honest. Henry and Eliza was brilliant. I'd give that story 4 stars. And yeah, so there's like a few different short stories in here, and I only enjoyed about 2 of them. The others were just like mediocre, which I expected because obviously this is her writing as a young teen and not as the prolific writer she became. But yeah, it was interesting to read this one. Then the next 2 star I have is The Wizard of Oz. And I have never read The Wizard of Oz before. I've only ever been familiar with the film adaptation, which I've never been that fond of. However, I went seeing Wicked last year or the year before, and I adored it. I thought it was fantastic. I loved the story with the witch, and I read The Wizard of Oz thinking that it had more of that in it, and it didn't. I think I just want to read the book of Wicked, which I do have at home. I think that might be better for me. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of this story anyway. It was interesting to see how it was originally, but again, it's just never really been one of my faves. So there was that one. That I listened to on audiobook, and the other audiobook that I was listening to was Marley and Me. Hated it. Really did not like this book. There are so many instances of animal abuse in this book, and it really, really, really fucking annoyed me. There's instances where the dog gets really excited when he sees people, like if they come home, like that's what dogs do. If you like come back to your house, you could have been gone for 5 minutes and the dog will be all over you. That happens with my dogs, that happens with all dogs. They're just very happy to see people. And so like when they come in the door, the dog runs at them and he's like, oh my god, you're home, this is amazing. And they want him to stop, so they start lifting their leg up, and so that when the dog runs at them, he will collide with their knee. And then there's another instance where the dog rips a cushion or something, and his wife, he goes in and his wife is just proper hitting the dog. And I don't understand why he would write about this as if it's okay. It just was not. It made me so uncomfortable. I would have given it 1 star, but it was clear that they loved the dog, and he did have a good life and they had a good life with him, but I found that was just not acceptable for me, and I really didn't enjoy it at all. Maybe I should have given it 1 star. I'm very angry about it. Actually, it might be 1 star. Maybe pretend this was earlier than the 2 stars. The next thing I want to talk about is another audiobook that I listened to, and that was Pushing Perfect. Now, this I picked up for the Winter Biennial Bibliothon. There was a challenge on there to read a book you didn't know anything about, so I just scrolled through my BookBeat app and just picked a book at random for this. And I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 3 stars, but the first half of it was definitely a 4.5 stars. The second half went very much to the YA side and to very angsty and all that sort of stuff, but the first half I found a really good meditation on like mental health and self-esteem and that sort of thing with teenage young girls, and I really enjoyed that. The audiobook narrator was absolutely fantastic. She really captured the sort of like young girl voice that it needed, so that was really cool. Now in this, basically, one day when she is growing up, when she just gets to puberty, the protagonist gets a spot on her face that's like she thinks is terrible, and she basically has an outbreak of spots. She had quite a bad skin condition. She goes to the doctors and there's nothing really that they can do. She just has a really bad acne situation basically. And she is called Perfect. Like everyone calls her, I can't remember what her name is now, but everyone calls her, maybe it's Kate, like Perfect Kate, something like that. And she is basically attached to this name and everyone calling her Perfect, and she feels like she isn't perfect anymore. And she goes home and her mum immediately is like, oh, that's not good, we should sort that out, let's cover it with makeup, let's put makeup all over you. She basically develops a really bad anxiety disorder, and there was a lot of people on Goodreads saying that they didn't like this book because they were doing all this and it was just over some spots. People put so much pressure on girls to look perfect that it would be a big deal that she has spots. It is such a small thing as spots. However, because of our society, it becomes a big deal and it shouldn't be. And those people on Goodreads are right, it shouldn't be, but it is. Yeah, I just found those reviews a little bit off the mark because it is something that women would be bothered about today because of how much pressure society puts on them. So I thought that was really, really cool. I found her panic over school and not being able to see past school very relatable. I know when I was at school I thought it was the be all and end all. I had to get good grades or my life was a failure, and obviously the minute you kind of get past that, the minute I got to university I realised that wasn't the case. But through school and college I had such bad stress levels and like self-harm problems and everything because of how stressed I was over this pressure from school and to do so well. I found that she had a very similar mindset to me and I found that very, very relatable. I did find it a positive book, and the fact that she goes through all of these things, and about halfway through the book she basically makes friends with some people and she is in a friend group there and she begins to accept herself and everything just gets a bit better. And that's great, and I'm really glad that they had that positive thing and a positive ending and, you know, her overcoming these things. However, once it did get past that middle, it became very much a bunch of YA cliches with like boys that she met being described by every single physical characteristic that they could have, obsessively thinking about boys, and like the ending was really cheesy and the whole situation was a little bit far-fetched. So yeah. However, I gave it 3 stars because that first half was so fantastic in terms of like representing that time in a young girl's life. I mean, obviously it can happen in a young boy's life as well, but they are pressured in different ways to the ways girls are pressured. Then I listened to another audiobook, which was The Magician's Nephew, which is kind of the 6th book in the Narnia series, but kind of the first. It's a prequel to everything that happens in the Narnia universe, and it's all about how the world was created. And yeah, I enjoyed this. It was alright. I gave it 3 stars. I enjoyed going back into this world again, and yeah, it was pretty good. That's pretty much all I have to say about it. Next was Crow by Ted Hughes. I read this to kind of get more of an insight into Grief's a Thing with Feathers because I really wanted to read this before I reread that book, and this wasn't anything special for me. It was okay. Yeah, none of the poems stood out as amazing. They were just alright. This follows a crow going through history and seeing like major events of history and that sort of thing. Ted Hughes is a very, very famous poet, and his wife I also read a poetry collection from. So I read Ariel by Sylvia Plath. I gave this 3 stars as well. Some of the poems in here were 5 stars, but then some of the poems, they didn't really speak to me, so I averaged it out at around 3 stars. Sylvia Plath wrote like a big collection of poetry in the year before she was dying, I think it is, and like the poems for Ariel were taken from this, the poems for Winter Trees were taken for that. Obviously she committed suicide, and this is basically the year running up to that suicide that she was writing all these poems, so she obviously was very troubled at this time, and that is definitely reflected in these poems. One of the beautiful things that she wrote was, "Dying is an art like everything else, I do it exceptionally well." There were some brilliant poems in here. Tulips, oh my god, I adored this. This was a lot longer and written in a very different style to the poetry that I usually read, but I thought it was absolutely amazing, just so fantastic. We had a birthday present that was also really good. Daddy was very interesting. She makes a lot of allusions to Germans and to Jewish people in this, which I didn't know how I felt about. But yeah, so I read both these poetry collections. I preferred this one to this one. Not the biggest fan of Ted Hughes anyway, so yeah, read those. Then the next thing I read was City of Bones by Cassandra Clare. This was a reread for me. I have only ever read this book before. I read it and then there's like a reveal at the end that I needed to know whether it was true or not. I looked it up online and then was like, oh well, I know the story now, I'm not going to read them. Basically spoiled it for myself, but now I cannot remember what I looked up, so I've decided to pick them up. This is the 10th anniversary edition, which is beautiful, and yeah, I enjoyed rereading it. I give it 3.5 stars. The final thing that I finished this month was Scott Pilgrim and the Infinite Sadness. This is the 3rd volume in the Brian Lee O'Malley Scott Pilgrim series, and I loved it. Again, I'm just absolutely adoring this series. It's a shame because I'm not at home and I can't read as many graphic novels. They are very expensive here and I just don't have them here with me. But these are definitely filling my graphic novel gap because I am just adoring this series so much. It's so fantastic. So I read that one. And then we have, yes, the abundance of currently reading, because I am literally every day waking up and being like, oh, I want to read that today. Oh, I want to read that today. Oh, I want to read that today. I'm picking a different book like every single day, and it's annoying me so much. So the first one that I've started is the 2nd of Cassandra Clare's series, City of Ashes. I've never read this before, so I'm starting with this. I'm not loving it. I'm about 90 pages in, and the narrative style has changed completely. The first one is completely told from Claire's perspective, and this one is told from a few different people's perspectives, and that's kind of, I don't know why it's bothering me so much. I just feel like if you wrote a book in one narrative style, you should stay in your narrative style for the whole series. I know that's probably very silly and not how things work, but I don't know. It just seems to be bothering me for some reason. But I'm reading that one. Then I started Red Rising the other day because I was having a shit day and I love this book. I am 102 pages in, obviously adoring it. Obviously we'll be finishing it very soon, and I'm going to reread them all, and then I'm going to read Iron Gold, and I'm so excited for that. Then I started Will Grayson by John Green and David Levithan, and I am 24 pages into this. This is very interesting so far. Then we have The Sign of Four by Arthur Conan Doyle, which I am about a chapter off the end of, or 2 chapters off the end of, so I will definitely be finishing this soon. Not enjoying this as much as the first one, which is really disappointing. I keep zoning out when I'm reading it because it's not really holding my attention, which I didn't find at all with The Study in Scarlet, so that's a bit annoying, but I'm hoping the ending is better. Then we have my biggest disappointment of the month, which is Artemis by Andy Weir, which I am 115 pages through and want to DNF so bad, but I just feel like there's enough intrigue in here to make me want to keep reading it, but then it's terrible and I want to DNF it, and it's annoying me that it's terrible because Martian is such a brilliant story. This book is not a memoir, and the narrator is way too aware of an audience. Constantly Jazz in this will talk about something and be like, give us exposition. So she'll be very like, oh, blah, 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 we do this on Mars. Oh, you might not realise because this is why we do this and blah, 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 blah. And number one, I don't like being spoon-fed a shit ton of information, which is what this book is doing. There's so much just spoon-feeding info instead of working it into the story. And then also just people don't think like that. If this girl is supposed to have grown up on Mars, if she was running into these daily situations, she would not be explaining them in her head. And because she isn't aware of the reader, this isn't set up like a diary, unless you get to the end and find out it is, but I don't think we're going to. They just wouldn't happen like that. People don't think like that, and I just find that completely unbelievable. I have no connection to the characters at all. I'm not, like, when I read it, I'm aware that I'm reading, which is one of the worst things for me. When I read a book, that happens usually for the first like 20 pages of a book, and after that I will be in the book and I won't be aware that I'm reading it. I'll just kind of have it going on in my head. But with this, aware the whole time. Oh my god, the protagonist is so childish. He like kind of tries to bring up sex and women's issues, but in a really childish way, which I'm just not enjoying. There's these emails between her and a guy on Earth that I'm not enjoying. I don't know why they're there. They're just annoying me. Yeah, this is just a big bag of not good, and I'm not enjoying it. And I have such a big problem with DNF in books. I find it really hard to do, and I really want to finish this, and it's annoying me because I do not want to finish it. And so I know it's probably going to sit on my bedside table for the next year because I won't want to say that I've DNF'd it, but I won't want to read it, and that's going to really fucking annoy me. So yeah, there's that. So that is my January wrap up. Quite negative, really, but I'm excited for this month because it is Feminist Lit Feb and it is Cozy-a-thon, and I'm just going to read loads of cool things, and I'm excited for it and just forget about a lot of these books, especially this one. Hopefully this one just disappears and gets stolen, and that would be nice. So yes, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!